Hey everyone, Cory here with one quick announcement before we get into today's show. Over the past several years, whenever I've spoken to revenue leaders in charge of global teams, they all seem to gravitate toward one conundrum. And that conundrum is this. When selecting a sales methodology and or planning a global sales training initiative, how do you balance customization with consistency? Right? On the one hand, it is necessary to standardize. You want the common approach, you want the common framework, the common language across regions. On the other hand, what works in APAC might not work in EMEA, right? The training has to be in language, it has to be culturally relevant and attuned, and it's got to account for the different ways the business is done within those specific regions. Today, we talk with four sales training experts with deep expertise in doing just this. We talk with PJ Nisbet and Candice October, who are based out of London in the UK. We have Yuichi Abe, who's based out of Tokyo in Japan, and Najibi Haddad coming to us from Mexico City. They all have different viewpoints, and this episode is jam-packed with actionable insights that you can implement if you're looking to take on a similar initiative. I want to also mention that while PJ and Candice are going to speak with us in English, Yuichi is speaking to us in Japanese, and Najibi is speaking to us in Spanish. So if you don't speak those languages, you can find the subtitled videos on YouTube. Listen and enjoy.
We often get this question, will this work in this industry? Or will this work in this culture or this country? And the beauty of the framework is it's based on human psychology. So if you're selling to a human, it will work because this is how people buy. It doesn't matter what industry you're in, it doesn't matter which country you're in, there's nuances and there's obviously things we can adapt and shift to ensure that it's really relevant to different cultures and things like that. But in terms of the framework in itself, it's human psychology.
You're listening to the B2B Revenue Executive Experience, a podcast dedicated to helping executives train their sales and marketing teams to optimize growth. Whether you're looking for techniques and strategies or tools and resources, you've come to the right place. Let's accelerate your growth in 3, 2, 1.
Hello, everyone, and welcome to the B2B Revenue Executive Experience. I'm your host, Cory, and today we have with us two guests. We have Candice October. She is a dynamic sales effectiveness expert, facilitator, and a managing partner at both ValueSelling and Nisbet Associates. With more than a decade of experience spanning sales strategy, organizational development, and talent coaching, Candice equips sales teams with the practical tools and proven methodologies they need to drive consistent, sustainable revenue growth. She's also passionate about helping people and teams grow, whether that's through coaching, sales training, or org development. Her leadership philosophy focuses on practical, people-first ways to boost performance. Prior to joining ValueSelling, she held leadership roles at Worldsview Academy, Pepcar Holdings Limited, and Skills Evolve. Now, we also have with us PJ Nisbet. He's a sales leader and performance coach with more than 25 years of experience helping orgs elevate their sales effectiveness. He's the managing director at Nisbet Associates, where he partners with revenue leaders to embed scalable, value-based sales strategies across their teams. As a managing partner for EMEA at ValueSelling Associates, PJ has trained and coached more than 8,000 sales professionals around the world, working with companies across manufacturing, financial services, and tech to drive consistent, measurable growth. He's known for turning complex sales challenges into practical, repeatable processes and for helping sales teams adopt the ValueSelling framework, not merely as a methodology, but as a mindset for lasting success. Candice, PJ, welcome to the show.
Thank you. Good to be here.
Thank you. Great to be here.
Yeah, I'm excited to get into it. And to start, help the audience, get to know you a little bit better. Let's talk about your journey. So both of you have built impressive careers in sales leadership and coaching. We'll start with you, Candice. What were the pivotal moments that sparked your passion for sales, and how have those early experiences shaped your leadership philosophy?
Brilliant. Thanks for the question, Cory. I guess so. I studied organizational psychology, and out of university, I was a typical university student and didn't know what to do with that. I was like, oh, what am I going to do? So I went to an assessment center, and they did all the tests and they said, well, you should be in sales. You like people, you like to talk. People tend to like you. Sales is a good area for you to go into. So sales found me. I ended up in a call center in London and started out my first day. I remember they were like 100 calls on the phone. The best way to get through it is just pick up the phone. So I literally started with no experience in sales, straight off the bat, 100 calls, and I was terrible. I was awful, and made all the calls, hit the numbers, but wasn't hitting the numbers with the meetings. And I was there for quite a fair amount of time, and I just wasn't any good. So I thought, well, sales isn't really for me. But I continued. I thought, let me carry on. I went into more relationship management type of sales. Still, I was having great conversations, building great relationships, but I wasn't hitting my number. And that's where I was actually introduced to value selling framework. I finally got the training that I needed when I realized, oh, actually, there is a science to this. There's a framework. And as soon as I started following a process, I was like, okay. So it's not just all about asking about people's families and kids and how they're doing, building relationships. Like, there's a whole different part of sales, which I wasn't ever trained to do effectively. And as soon as I got trained, my success just started coming. And I worked through the ranks, moved into sales leadership, and then started working in organizational development and selling organizational development interventions. And that's where I really did a little pivot from sales because I realized that I enjoy seeing the changes happen. So I wasn't just selling the interventions. I wanted to be part of that. So I moved into sales leadership. Well, I moved into teaching leaders how to effectively lead and facilitating and change management, culture work. And that's really where I spent 5 to 6 years in the coaching space and in the change management space. And that's when PJ called me up because we had worked together previously. And he said, well, you've got the sales experience and the expertise, and now you're focused on the change management and culture work and leadership development. That's really what we need in value selling. We want to ensure that we're focused on lasting behavior change. So I joined value selling 6 years ago and really combining my passion and love for sales with that culture work and leadership development of how do you actually make the sales training stick and long-term reinforcement. So I know it's a lot of words, but yeah, that's me in a nutshell.
Oh, hey, it's a fantastic story. And especially that, you went all the way from, okay, sit in this chair, make 100 calls a day, to then, helping organizations kind of restructure, getting into leadership philosophy and really making sure that people have the tools that sounds like you didn't necessarily have at first, which makes a lot of difference in the world.
Exactly.
PJ, what was it like for you? How did you start in this world and what kept you in it?
Thank you. Yeah, and thanks again for inviting us on. So I, like Candice, studied industrial psychology at university and then joined Shell. And I worked for 10 years for Shell Oil Company. Actually started as an HR guy. I started as a training officer back in the day. Quickly realized that the sales folks have a lot more fun than HR people. So switched into sales. And then had 5 jobs in 10 years with Shell, climbing the ladder as a sales manager. Then went on my own into a family business, completely different. It was buying and selling agricultural parts. So it was basically engineering and trading agricultural equipment. So completely different to Shell. But that was a small business, started with 10 or 15 people, grew it up to 100 or so, and really enjoyed that experience as an entrepreneur. Sold that company and then thought, well, I've seen the big corporate video. I've seen the small family business grow it up video. What I really want to do now is something which I think what I found as an entrepreneur was absolutely critical. You can have great products, you can have great, R&D, customer service, whatever, but actually until someone goes and gets the order, nothing else happens. So it's the lifeblood of any business. It's hard, and that's why there's so many courses and so many books, and it's something which I think it's amazing how much money is spent on sales training, and I think that's because it's hard. It's not easy to do. And then thirdly, the other reason why, because I've been doing this now for about 15 years, particularly in the last few years, has changed dramatically. And I think many people are still selling in the old way and going in with their little leaflets and pitching and their 40 slide PowerPoint decks and trying to sell. And of course, it's changed dramatically. So it's critical, it's hard, and it's changed dramatically. And I thought, well, this is the area that I want to work in, really trying to help people with this skill, which is hard.
So PJ, what first drew you to the world of sales? Talk to us a little bit about your journey.
Thank you. So great to be here. And to say, just like Candice, I also started with industrial psychology degree, having left school. I then joined Shell Oil as actually a sales trainer. So I've kind of gone full circle. I quickly realized that the sales folks were having a lot more fun than the HR folks. So jumped over to sales and then had 5 jobs in 10 years with Shell Oil, going through the ranks. After 10 years in corporate, joined a family business, actually completely different to Shell. It was as buying and selling agricultural parts and agricultural machinery. And we grew that little company from, 10 welders into a pretty big company in South Africa, sold that off. And then I worked for the company that bought it for a couple of years. And then thought, what do I really want to do? I mean, I've done the big corporate video with Shell, which was a great experience. Done the growing the family business, built that up, sold it off. And what I figured I would like to do is work in what I think is the most crucial area of any business. One is nothing happens without the sale, as you know, unless you get the purchase order. It doesn't matter how good your products are, how good your customer service is. Unless you've got an order, the rest doesn't happen. It's kind of like the engine, the key to the engine, which starts the whole business process. So it's critical. I always found it hard as an entrepreneur, difficult to do. And that's why there are countless books and courses and huge amounts of money spent on sales training, because this is not easy. It's a difficult thing to do. And then finally, what I've found, particularly in the last few years, is there are lots of people still selling in the old way. So and of course, the world of selling has changed dramatically, and I'm sure we'll talk about that, but it's changed dramatically in the last 5 years, even more probably in the last 10 years. So those were the reasons why I thought, if I'm going to, for my third chapter, if you like, after the big corporate and the family business, I really want to work in this area because of those reasons. It's critical, it's hard, and it's changed a lot.
Yeah, absolutely. I couldn't agree more. And something that stood out to me in both of your answers was, with Candice, that aha moment, like, wait, there's math behind this. There's processes behind this, right, that I can dig into. And PJ, you saying how hard it is, especially for entrepreneurs. And at the same time, it's a skill set that can be taught, which kind of gets lost. And obviously, both of you settled with value selling, with value-based methodologies. And PJ, what originally attracted you to that value-based way of selling, that more modern way of selling?
It's an interesting one, because when I started out on this journey, I sort of did what most people did and Googled top sales methodologies in the world, came up with it, and then sort of applied and said, can I look after you either in South Africa or the UK, and operate in those 2 countries. I actually started with another methodology called Miller-Hyman, which some listeners might have heard of. It's a famous methodology. And there are many wonderful methodologies out there, and it's a great methodology. But what I found was, in the first 2 or 3 years, that it was quite a heavy lift. So I was going into my clients and saying, hey, how many blue sheets have you done? And how many gold sheets have you done? And they would say, well, actually, we love it, but it's too much work for, we're busy trying to close deals. I was running an interim sales contract in Johannesburg, and value selling arrived and put in the value selling framework. And I thought, wow, this works because of its simplicity, and people got it. And they actually instinctively can understand what they have to do to add value and close a sale. And it's not, 1,000 spreadsheets or walls or things you have to put in the CRM. So it was actually a coincidence that I found value selling. I was busy doing another methodology when someone came in and said, here's one. And actually, I was a consumer. I was a sales manager at the time.
Okay. Yeah, it makes sense. You saw it from both sides, and sometimes the coincidences are the best ones, take us on new paths. Candice, I feel like you've talked about this a lot, that, moving beyond value selling as a methodology and kind of going back to value-based selling as more of a mindset. What do you see as the kind of distinction between the two?
It's definitely that shift in mindset. And it's that shift from I'm going in to sell something to you, instead of connecting to what's really important to the buyer and connecting to that. It actually, I was thinking about this the other day because I was facilitating a workshop, and someone said, at the end of the workshop, I said, what are your biggest takeaways, your aha moments? And the light bulb went on, and they were just like, I get it. It's not about selling. It's not about selling. I mustn't go into these meetings with the idea to sell something. It's about helping my buyers buy, helping my buyers solve their problems and connect with what's valuable to them. And it was like the lights just, they went off. It was like, okay, that makes sense. And I think too often salespeople feel the need to push to say, this is what I'm selling. Come and let's talk about it, as opposed to really connecting to the problems, thinking about what your solution solves and really probing into that and connecting with your buyer.
Yeah, if I could add to that and just say I completely agree with that. And I think it's this kind of paradox that you're not selling, you're helping people solve their biggest priority with problems that you can solve with your capabilities. It's kind of an outside-in approach as opposed to inside-out. And what we're saying is really selling with insight, understanding your buyer's needs really well, and then asking them questions, because selling, I think, is about asking questions to get them to think about things they haven't thought about before. So it's a real outside-in approach. So have you thought about this? Have you thought about that? You're really trying to help them as opposed to sell them something. I find with most participants that I work with, that's a huge mind shift. And then we start and say, this is going to sound paradoxical, but we don't want you to sell. You think you're here on a sales training course, but actually don't sell. We're in the business of coming up with clever questions that get the buyer to think for themselves about how good your solution is. But it has to, everybody would prefer, nobody likes being told anything. People prefer to think of it themselves. So your job as a sales professional is to come up with a really good question where the person thinks, oh, that's a really good idea. I think we should do that. But it's their idea, not yours. And that's the art and the science, really.
Yep, that's the key, right? It comes from them, and they're a lot more prone to believe their own ideas and their own thinking than anyone telling them anything, like all of us. And I kind of struck in this conversation by that light bulb moment, by that mindset shift and how simple it sounds. Why do you all think that it's so kind of revolutionary, that switch that flips from like, no, I have to sell things, I have to focus on the products I have, to, no, I'm really trying to solve problems on the individual level? Why is that?
It's huge. I mean, I think it's because people are so proud of their company. So when they come in as a new employee, they get a ton of product training, hours and hours and hours of all the new products. And then they get really good at product knowledge, and they're very proud of their, the coolest product. They're very proud of their company. And it's kind of like, that's my job, is to be what I call a talking brochure. And they don't realize that actually that's not the modern way of selling. The modern way of selling is you have to think about really good questions to get people to think about things they haven't thought about before and how you can help them.
And to add to that, you've got the one part of side of things, which PJ's talking about, that we're passionate about what we do as sellers. So we want to talk about it, but also buyers, they want to hear about it because they don't necessarily want to talk about their problems because they know their problems. So if I'm calling you in as a sales rep, I want to hear about what you're doing. I don't want to necessarily talk about my problems because I know them. It's that kind of shift. If my buyer is taking me there and I like talking about it, that's why we end up talking about the solution and therefore potentially pitching the wrong solution, because we're not doing that in-depth discovery of what are we actually trying to solve here.
It's what we call the art and the science of selling. So that exactly what Candice is talking about, this kind of conflict between where the buyer wants to go, which is to learn more about your solution and find out how much it costs. What a good seller would want to do would be to figure out what problems can we uniquely solve and what sort of priority are these for yours. And there's a kind of tension between those two. Buyers driving into what we call the solution box, tell me about your product, and it's the happy place for the buyer and for the seller to be in the solution box. We're saying, how do you skillfully stay out of the solution box without irritating the buyer? Because obviously you can't say, oh, no, I'm not telling you anything about that. So you have to be skillful enough not to get dragged into the solution box. And then the science, that's the art. The science, we would say, is developing the really purposeful questions, normally probing questions, that get the person to think about things they haven't thought about before and that are directly aligned to what you're good at. But you're not just going to tell them what you're good at. You're going to ask them a question about what problem they might have that matches that, what we would call unique capability. So the framework is very simple. It's actually very deep in many ways. I always say it has an elegant simplicity. If you use it properly, very, very powerful.
I really like that. I've never heard it characterized quite like that before. Both of you said, right? There was that tension there, that push and pull. And also there's that box, that happy place where everyone can kind of go to. There's not going to be any conflict. No one's going to feel vulnerable, uncomfortable. And yet we have to get outside of that or we're going to face problems down the road. Even if we make the sale, right? We're going to face problems keeping the customer.
Yeah, exactly.
So obviously both of you have trained on value selling. You've trained, thousands of people around the world, different industries, different cultures, regions. What makes the value selling framework so applicable across geographical regions, cultures, industries, what have you?
Yeah, I mean, maybe I'll jump in and Candice can add to it, but I would say, and as I mentioned earlier, there are thousands of methodologies out there. And to be very honest, a lot of them say the same thing, different color boxes, different kind of questions, but actually all very similar. If you think about solution selling as a broad way of selling, there are hundreds of these things. I think the difference with value selling would be its simplicity, because what happens in most cases is people, especially when they design it themselves, is they overcomplicate it. They say, why don't we just put this in? Why don't we just put in white space analysis? Why don't we just do that? And pretty soon you end up with something which is unwieldy for most busy salespeople to use. So I think the fact that value selling is only 6 boxes with open probe confirmed questions, very simple, is the beauty of it. It's the kind of elegant simplicity. And I think if you're talking about making it stick and global rollouts and doing, big geographic implementations, it has to be simple. So that would be the one thing. The other thing I would say is we believe strongly in teaching people in their own languages, which is why we have 16 different languages we can facilitate in. We think from a learning point of view, people learn much better if it's in their own language. So I think it's about simplicity, obviously like a blended, but I think most sales methodologies use a blended learning approach. I think where we differentiate is probably our ability to facilitate in multiple languages. I mean, 16 languages is quite a good number. You're going to cover most sales teams with that number. So blended, own language, and simplicity, I think, are key in a big global rollout.
And I think adding to that, and we often get this question, will this work in this industry? Or will this work in this culture or this country? And the beauty of the framework is it's based on human psychology. So if you're selling to a human, it will work because this is how people buy. It doesn't matter what industry you're in, it doesn't matter which country you're in, there's nuances and there's obviously things we can adapt and shift to ensure that it's really relevant to different cultures and things like that. But in terms of the framework in itself, it's human psychology.
That's an excellent point. At the end of the day, buyers are buyers, right? And we have to get to know the human side of the problems we're solving. So I want to dig into this a little bit more. Let's talk about the real world application. You both kind of mentioned rolling out across, large scale companies, global revenue teams, and things like that. What are some of the best practices for revenue leaders, whether they're rolling out value selling or rolling out any sales methodology across all their regions?
So we typically talk about a 4-legged table. So 4 elements you need to do. One leg is the training itself, the skills transfer. So a blended, and again, this would be common for most methodologies, but you would have a blended approach. You'd do some e-learning before to teach the basic concepts. You would do the actual workshops, either in person or virtual. We believe, again, like many methodologies, that practice is really important. So typically that workshop, whether it's virtual or in person, you should be spending most of the time, at least 30-40% of the time, with people practicing it, because although it's easy enough to understand it, but actually when I try it out, it's more difficult. So the practice piece is really important in the training part. And then micro-learning, which we would say is best practice. The science is if you remind someone every 7 to 10 days, little memory bubbles, they will recall much better. There's an important skills transfer piece, leg 1. Leg 2 is the technology support. So put it in your CRM, put it in a way that you forecast deals, adapt your forecasting, a weighted forecast, whatever it is, with the language or whichever methodology you choose. So you need to bake it into this. So when people come out of the workshop, they then see it in the CRM. I think that's really important. Bake it into your process. Leg number 3 is like when you do your one-on-ones, when you do your forecasting meetings, when you have your monthly sales meeting, be talking the language. So it's immediately applied, right? Within the first days after the training, they have a common language to use in their process. And then the final one, and probably the most crucial one, which I know is very close to Candice's heart, is the coaching piece. We believe, in fact, we both say if we're value selling to a client, we say, unless you're going to do the management training, I wouldn't bother, keep your money because you're just going to waste it. So that frontline sales management, of course, executive sponsorship's important, but even more important, your frontline sales managers need to be in the training. They need to lead the charge. They need to believe in it and they need to coach it. And if you haven't got that piece, it's probably not going to work. So we're very, very keen on the whole coaching piece.
And Candice, what would you add to that, particularly I'd love to hear more about the coaching side, because I saw a stat the other day from partners of ours that said 56% of managers admit they don't know how to coach.
Yeah, absolutely. And to PJ's point, if the leaders aren't coaching it, people are just going to get to month end, quarter end, and slip back into their old habits, old behaviors. So I would say first step is getting leadership buy-in, because it sounds simple, leaders should coach it. But so often in workshops, we may not have frontline leaders in that, and they're expected to coach it. They say, the leaders are too busy to be in the workshops. If the leaders aren't in the workshops, leading from the front and having that additional piece, you're at a big risk of it falling flat. So ensuring that leaders are involved early. So PJ and I did a recent global rollout where it was across many different countries. And I think we did, 30 discovery calls in the end, maybe a bit more, which seemed like a lot at the time. But that discovery was not only to ensure that we had a local language and different entity context to write case studies and things like that, but a really important piece of that was to get buy-in from the leaders because they felt a part of the process. So everyone who we connected with and spoke to before the workshop, obviously in the workshop, they're more bought in. And that initial buy-in, what's in it for them to drive that consistency is crucial.
Yep, it makes perfect sense.
I'll just maybe add to that as well, that what we find is the knee-jerk reaction is this won't work in my country. So if you're in Germany, in France, in Italy, in North America, Southeast Asia, this is great, but it won't work here. So you have to expect that. I firmly believe that unless the salesperson sees value in the methodology, it's not going to work. So if you position it, this is like an admin thing we're doing to put it in the CRM, you're going to get no adoption at all. So you have to position it away. And we start every workshop by just saying, you are the experts. A lot of you, and I think very often with sales teams, you end up with lots of people sitting there with folded arms, say, we've been on 1,000 sales courses. You can't teach us anything. And we say, look, you are the experts. What we're trying to do here is create best practices. We're going to really tap into your wonderful sales experience, dear 30-year-old sales professional, the 30 years experience sales professional, and take that knowledge and put it into sales playbooks and really share that experience, and with really taking your best practices and making them available to everybody. So don't look on it as a kind of sales 101 or sales ABC. This is a framework. It's a process to capture best practice so we can all have a value conversation in a better way. And then immediately you see people's go down and they relax a little bit because they think, that's good. I thought I was going to be here, doing the basic sales, but it's not that. It's a process methodology. And what we're trying to do is capture best practices.
Yeah, for sure. And it's an important point because, like you said, a lot of people that, especially top performers, right? They're gonna kind of post up, arms crossed, stare you down a little bit. You can't teach me anything. And it's so important to take that expertise that they've already built up with their sales process, products, industries, right? And to leverage that in a productive way. At the same time, I imagine it's difficult. I imagine there's a push and pull between leadership on the one hand, thinking like, okay, if I'm going to invest in a methodology at scale, I want to standardize things. That's probably one of the big boxes they're looking to check. And then you've got the individual teams in different countries, and you've got the absolute, right, to your point, back to the individual sellers. And no, I have my way of doing things. Like, it's not even, it might work 3 cities over even, but my way is different. How do you balance all those different competing viewpoints and opinions?
A recent application where we had a very seasoned professionals, they openly said, this is not going to add any value at all, but we'll do it because the current bosses have told us to do it. And what we found during the implementation, where we just approached it to say, we're looking for like 11 to 14 questions that are really going to help position the value of your products. And I said, let's think of like a complex sales situation where you're going to sell more and obviously make more commission on it. So let's think about those difficult scenarios, and let's think about what are the dozen or so questions that are going to help you close those complex deals. And immediately then they could see what was in it for them. They said, oh, okay, so we're trying to capture some really key questions to help us close more difficult deals. Okay, I'm in, let's go. But you have to position it that it's helping them. I think if you try and position it like the company has decided that we're doing this across the board and you have to comply, it's not going to work.
And I think that thanks to any change intervention at the end of the day, people don't like change that is done to them. Anything that is, we are being told to do this, you're going to meet resistance no matter what it is. So ensuring that they understand why it's important, but also that they're involved in the process. And we kind of take them through that journey on the workshops to involve them in the process. But what I found also really helpful is, afterwards, instead of saying, this is exactly what you need to do, asking them to say, okay, so we know there's some stats out there that 70 to 80% of learning is lost in the next 30 days if we don't effectively do anything with what you've just learned. So what can you do to ensure that this sticks for you and for the organization? And come up with ideas and put together an action plan. Once again, it's not, this is my action plan that I'm telling you to do. It's, you own this. You tell us what's going to work. And once again, that's that balance between standardization and allowing for input and allowing for local nuances and, what's going to work in your region. How can you bake that in? So giving them a voice within the process, whether it's change or whether it's sales or whether it's any change, that's hugely important.
A practical example of how not to do it is we have a lot of clients who say, like, we have some basic tools, like we have a conversational tool called a value prompter. And when the client says, do we have to do this for all deals, or shall we set a benchmark? Shall we say, we'll only do this for deals of 100,000 euros, for example? That for me is that means it's going to go sideways, because they are saying to them, so are you then saying to me that all deals under 100,000 aren't worth it? So why wouldn't you use it on every deal? It shouldn't be looked on as an admin deal. And what happens in those examples, and I've learned that over the years, is if you say it's like X 100,000, guess what? Every deal is 999,000 euros just below the threshold. So it's really the classic example of where it's an admin job, not a real conversational tool that's helping you. I mean, we've got clients who do this on WeChat in China in a small discussion, and they're doing it in 5 minutes. It's the same process. It's just really quick running through it. So it doesn't have to be a big, heavy lift. It's as Candice said, it's a psychological way of selling where you're focusing on what that person's priority is, what problems they have achieving it, how you can help them, and what the return's going to be in terms of impact. It's very simple.
We're going to shift gears just a little bit here because we talk about change a lot. And one of the biggest changes that I think we've all seen recently has been, AI, particularly in the sales world, right? We have people saying that, oh, it's going to augment all these jobs. It's going to be great. And then we see big companies laying off 20-25% of their workforce, investing in technology. We have people saying that, the SDR role is dead and gone. It should just be replaced. And Candice, you wrote an intriguing article a few months back. It was called Leading with Purpose in the Age of AI. And I think you said something like, AI is going to change the way we work, but it's never going to replace the essence of leadership. So Looking from a leadership philosophy lens, how can leaders ensure that we don't lose sight of that principle as we integrate AI into our workflows and our businesses more and more?
It's such an important conversation to be happening because I think there is a lot of talk around AI and a lot of talk about the efficiencies that AI will bring and focus on the efficiencies in the tech space and what technology should we be using in AI and how should we be using it. But there is less focus on the team members in terms of how are you equipping your teams to stay relevant, to focus on the skills that AI cannot do when it comes, that empathy, curiosity, building trust, working within their purpose. How are leaders equipping their teams with the skills to stay motivated and engaged and stay relevant? And I think that's a conversation which needs to have more of a focus. And I think at the moment, it seems like there's just too much buzz around AI, which is in terms of its efficiency and what it can do and all the tools. And yes, but what does that mean in terms of what you should be focusing on, which is equipping your teams to be able to get on board with AI? And that is a huge change process. And that is influencing your teams, which is a core of leadership.
Yeah, I think you need to flip the paradigm around from technology, AI, agents to putting the human first. So start with the human, what Candice is saying. So start with what busy work can we take away from the human using AI so they can do the things that AI can't do, things like building trust, build innovation, imagination, all of those things. And if you've got rid of some of your busy work, and we've wrapped around most of our sales training that we offer, we've obviously wrapped AI around it to help with that busy work. So if you want to create, prospecting emails, or you're trying to sell with insight, got all of the prompts for that. So we're trying to help people use the tools. But exactly as Candice said, start with the human and say, what are the things that you're really good at? Building trust, I think, is probably the number one thing that AI is probably never really going to do. Although, the stats are, I think 80% of people are scared of AI. So if you think about that stat, then trust is going to take a long time to come. I know that it's going to move quite quickly, but real trust, I think, is something humans have to do. Building relationships, empathy. It's going to be a while before AI can do that, if ever, I would argue, the trust aspect.
Yeah, especially when it's still hallucinating, like maybe 25, I think 30% of the time.
Yeah.
It'll deliberately do something, and then like a child, it'll look you in the eye, so to speak, and say, "No, I did not do that."
Yeah,
even though the evidence is sitting right in
The
front of
level
you.
of confidence is it's astounding.
We should all be so lucky, I think, to have that level
Exactly.
of confidence in ourselves. It seems like a lot of what we've been going back to, especially what you touched on, Candice, is speaking more to a really structured change management approach that, centers on the employees, the human beings, and kind of what you can do to help them, kind of future-proof themselves, upskill, and ultimately, hit the business goals that you want to. What are the top principles when you're looking at a huge change management approach, in your opinion, whether it's, rolling out AI or a sales methodology or something else?
Yeah, that's a really good question. So the model which we tend to use is called the influencer model. And really what it highlights is that people they often underwhelm change interventions, in the sense that, and you hear it all the time, they just say, oh, well, I sent an email. I taught them how to do it. Why aren't they doing it? So we do very little and expect to see the results and say, well, why haven't they changed? So thinking about it from the influencer model, it's thinking, how are we supporting that change? What are the behaviors that we're trying to drive, and being really succinct on what is that behavior? And then looking at how do we drive that from 3 different levels. And the first level is around personal level. And we've spoken about that quite a lot. So what's in it for the individual? Do they have that personal motivation to want to change? Why would they adopt this AI, or why would they adopt this methodology? So do they want to? And then also, have you given them the skills to do it? So once again, you're on that personal level. Do they have the skills to? So that's the first level. It's really on an individual basis. The second level is on the social basis, which is often gets overlooked. Peer pressure has a huge influence. So how are you utilizing social cohesion to drive change? Do you have your change champions in place? Do you have a number of things which are going to drive the change from within and not just from the top? So really emphasizing that social level, and how can you build off that peer pressure that we're also susceptible to? And then the final level is the structural level, which is, are we rewarding and incentivizing the right behavior, and are we making it easy for people? So structurally, PJ mentioned building it into the processes, things like that. That structural piece is so important. And too often what I find is they do the training and they do the reinforcement, and then they just think, okay, well, I trained them how to do it and I incentivized it. Why aren't they doing it? But there's a whole bunch of other influences that we should be using to increase your chances of success.
That's an excellent answer. PJ, is there anything you'd add to that?
These are kind of cultural shifts. So the 6 sources and influencer models, great. But I think you also, if you think about culture, it's about having really clear, the best sales leaders that I've worked with have got a really clear goal in terms of their target. So like, we're going to double, we're going to go 25%. They're crystal clear about their purpose. They're crystal clear about the behaviors that support that purpose. So you've got that senior level endorsement and driving it. I think there's an element also in terms of culture, in terms of psychological safety. So giving people the chance to try things, learning by making mistakes. And then I think very often sales leadership goes for like setting the bar. And if this is what you have to do, you have to have these bits for every deal. So it's the kind of stick. I think the carrot is important. I think the whole idea of catching people doing things right, of having celebrations, at the sales meeting, someone comes up and says, oh, I used the methodology and look what happened. So it's that peer group pressure that Candice is talking about. So I think it's about accountability, having a very clear target. And I think it's about to get the behavior change, you need both carrot and stick. Normally when we do our little management classes, the leaders are quite good on the execution piece. So you need to do this, you need to do that. And we often say to them, well, what's the upside? What are you doing to reward people? And okay, we should do something about that as well. So it kind of comes as a second thing that they do to think about the positive aspect of the behavior change.
Absolutely. Okay. As we move toward the end of the podcast, there are 2 questions that we ask every guest. And because there are 2 of you, I'm going to split it up, kind of flip a coin here. Candice, I'll start with you. So looking back on your own journey, if you could go back 5, 10, maybe even 15 years in the past, what is the one piece of career advice you would give your younger self and why?
Thinking about the advice I would give myself, looking back on my career, it would be something I tell my 5-year-old all the time, which is, if something is hard, it means you're learning something. So for me, it's about thinking about those hard times in my career and really shifting the focus to, what did I learn? What am I learning in those moments? So just not being so hard on myself and really focusing on, what are the takeaways of that lost deal or whatever it is? What have I learned from it? And that's a motto which I now try and focus on and bring myself to. So it would have been nice to have learned that a while back.
I guess excellent advice. And PJ, no one gets out easy. There are no easy questions here. So what we have for you is, we're recording this in May of 2025. So jumping ahead to 2030, 5 years out, what's a big shift coming for sales leadership that not a lot of people are talking about right now?
I mean, I think it's got to be around the impact of AI. It's got to be a shift in mindset. I think what happens is sales, for whatever reason, has a really bad name. I mean, people, when, the shutters come down, it is like salesperson's coming to see me, they're going to sell me something. So I think, rightly or wrongly, sales has a poor image. So the future, the 2030 future that I would see, is that sales professionals should be super educated in terms of using AI to really understand their customers, to really understand, their last financial performance, their competitors, what their challenges are. And you can do that now, but I think it will even get better and better as AI grows, so that when you're selling, you're actually approaching it as a really well-educated person who's helping them solve their biggest problems, and maybe, challenging them a little bit and telling them things which are going on in the market. But it's not about, the kind of I think maybe an American expression, the snake oil salesman who's like saying, look at this cool product I've got. You should buy this from me because you've never seen it. Those days have gone. And I think that will accelerate as people get into AI and they realize the power of agents, the power of agentic AI, where they're saying, let me share with you the research that I've done. And if you're not, it's a horrible cliche, what keeps you awake at night. But what should be keeping you awake at night is these things, because this is the kind of research that I've done using AI. So I would love for there to be a complete shift away from this kind of rather cheesy image that most salespeople have to we're really, super educated professionals who are going to help you who are going to help you position your products in a value-added way.
I love it. And it's been such a fascinating conversation. Candice, PJ, thank you so much for coming on. If people want to learn more about you, where should they go?
Probably LinkedIn for me would be good. You can always find me there.
LinkedIn or Nisbet Associates or ValueSelling website.
All right, sounds good. Well, thank you again.
Brilliant. Thanks so much, Cory.
Thanks, Cory. We appreciate it. Thanks a lot.
Today, I'm excited to be joined by Najibi Haddad. She is a ValueSelling managing partner who is passionate about sales and training. She works with national and international organizations to improve KPIs by increasing sales productivity, working as a team, building credibility with prospects, and ultimately providing value to clients and customers. Now, over the past 25 years, Najibi has worked for organizations such as Xerox, Learning International, Zinger Miller, Achieve Global, Omega Performance, and many others. She brings a wealth of experience to global training, and I am so excited to have her on the show. Najibi, welcome.
Thank you, Cory. My pleasure.
Today, we're talking about global training. And first of all, I think that some organizations maybe have misconceptions when they go to scale training internationally. So when an organization is thinking about scaling a training program globally, what do you see as the most important first step?
Cuando una organización busca escalar capacitación a nivel internacional, el primer paso más importante es alinear una estrategia global que sea clara de formación, que equilibre consistencia con flexibilidad local, que sea consistente y flexible. También debemos considerar 5 pasos clave. Por ejemplo, definir los objetivos y resultados principales. ¿Qué problema estratégico de negocio se quiere resolver? ¿Qué comportamientos o habilidades deben ser consistentes globalmente? ¿Y qué métricas definirán el éxito? Esto es muy importante. Otro paso importante es considerar las necesidades locales y el contexto cultural, tanto el idioma, las normas culturales, estilos de aprendizaje y la madurez del mercado. También la parte de elegir métodos de entrega que sean escalables, es decir, será presencial, virtual, blended, digital, etcétera, ¿no? Y asegurar esta parte de que la tecnología sea accesible en todas las regiones. Y un punto importante adicional es identificar campeones locales como coaches, facilitadores o equipos de la habilitación de ventas de estas personas que están en la parte de talento que garanticen la adopción. Y un consejo importante sería que se empezara por un piloto en alguna región, de este piloto se dé retroalimentación y posteriormente se pueda impartir y escalar.
Yeah, that's an excellent point when you think about like when you want to balance consistency, right? Like the skills you're going after, the global methodologies to support those skills, that high level business issue you want to fix and solve ultimately, and being aware that you need to customize in terms of language, culture, business norms within the region and really have that rich contextualization going on. And I really did love the point that you made about cultivating local champions, if I understood that correctly, in the region, like with enablement, because I think that's something that goes overlooked, right? Sometimes it's really helpful to get enablement leaders or even leadership, high-level leadership or managers in the room first and get them bought into the methodology before trying to scale and do a huge rollout, right?
Mm-hmm.
Okay. So next question, I kind of want to dive into balancing the consistency, like you said, sales process methodology with the need for personalization and local relevance. So how do you balance consistency in training content with that need for localization?
Ok, lo primero que tenemos que hacer es definir, por ejemplo, cuál es el sistema operativo, cómo va a operar toda esta parte del contenido. Por ejemplo, el proceso de ventas, los valores, la visión, las métricas en cuanto a su cumplimiento, la propuesta de valor, etcétera. También es importante construir un currículo modular, crear plantillas que permitan localización y combinar el contenido global con materiales locales. Esto es sumamente importante. Empoderar a los facilitadores locales es también un punto clave, proveer guías, herramientas globales y alinear a los equipos a nivel global y a nivel regional. Y finalmente, monitorear la calidad y los resultados es un paso importante, es decir, recopilar la retroalimentación de los participantes y facilitadores para poder ajustar cualquier cambio que se requiera a nivel tanto local como global.
Yep. That's a fantastic answer. Especially, I love the point of you can have the best plans in the world, right? But then there's always the need to calibrate, to adjust, right, on the global level, and then to adjust on the local level to solicit feedback, to understand what's working, because these huge training rollouts, right? They're big machines. There's lots of moving parts. It's never just one and done. You have to revisit. You have to revamp. That's an important consideration. So when we're looking at the LATAM market specifically, as an expert in the region, what do you see as, the unique learning preferences and important business culture considerations?
Bueno, en nuestras culturas, en esta cultura tanto de México como de Latinoamérica, hay un alto valor en la conexión humana. La interacción cara a cara fortalece la confianza y el impacto del aprendizaje en el participante. También es importante la preferencia por aprendizaje guiado, es decir, la parte de que los formatos sean estructurados, que sea una facilitación colaborativa, no directiva. Somos más de trabajo en equipo o de información así en equipo, que tenga un enfoque práctico, que sea realista a través de, por ejemplo, compartir ejercicios, ejemplos locales y, por ejemplo, los role plays también son esenciales. El respeto por la jerarquía, pero que haya apertura a la colaboración. Y la diversidad cultural entre países, ¿no? Por ejemplo, México, Argentina y Colombia tienen estilos diferentes de negocio y también expectativas, normas y todo esto también diferente.
Yeah, that's an excellent point. I was struck by the, again, if I'm understanding correctly, the point about sort of show me how this works for me, right? How is this going to work in daily workflows? How am I going to use this moving forward? That's so crucial because I think a lot of companies come into this and think, oh, maybe I'm going to check a box. Did the training, things are going to improve, right? But unless you give people a very clear pathway from here's how you're going to apply this from day one, then we run into things like the forgetting curve and the training, the adoption suffers. Okay, final question. When we think specifically about value-based selling and the value selling framework, what, in your opinion, what makes that resonate particularly well in the LATAM region?
Ok, mira, en la parte de la cultura centrada en relaciones, ¿no? La metodología de value selling promueve preguntas valiosas, promueve el descubrir necesidades y promueve la co-creación de valor. Resuena bien para Latinoamérica porque precisamente a nosotros nos gusta esta parte de las relaciones, ¿no? Somos muy de relaciones. Entonces, esta parte es muy importante para nosotros y esto lo proporciona la metodología de Value Selling. También otro punto importante es las conversaciones versus presentaciones, ¿no? Esto ha evolucionado. El enfoque es más consultivo, no es agresivo. El enfoque de Value Selling se centra en escuchar y entender antes de vender. Y finalmente, yo creo que otra parte importante es que se conecta el valor con los retos del comprador. Es decir, hay un cambio en el enfoque de producto-precio hacia el descubrimiento de problemas de negocio. Ir más allá de estar en esta dinámica nada más del producto y del precio, sino ir hacia los problemas de negocio que realmente se pueden resolver a través de la metodología.
Yep. I love it. And it's advice that never goes out of style. And unfortunately, we have to repeat, which is when you're thinking about don't present, have a conversation. Conversations, not presentations. Ultimately, it's about understanding. It's about listening, not telling. Selling is engaging, right? It's not just speaking. It's not just pitching your idea. So excellent advice. Najibi, thank you so much for joining us on the show. This has been a great conversation. If people want to learn more about you, where should they go?
You can find me in LinkedIn or in my email, which is najibi.haddad@valueselling.com.
Perfect. Thanks again.
Thank you.
Yuichi started his career at IBM, and prior to joining ValueSelling Associates as a managing partner, he worked at Gartner, Japan. As a sales manager for the manufacturing and supply chain services, he was instrumental in helping clients build their IT strategies by communicating with CIOs about the need for better IT strategy development. From his experience at Gartner, Mr. Abe grasped the importance of a strong framework to encourage team growth, and he found the ideal methodology in the value selling framework, which he has used as his foundation for building his teams and their success. Yuichi, it's a pleasure to have you on the show. Welcome.
Thank you.
Yes, I'm excited to get into it. As a global training expert, and I want to dive into particularly how value-based selling is working in the APAC region. But first, what would you say, what is the most important factor when planning a global sales training initiative?
そうですね。各地域の特性を生かしながら、グローバル標準化を進めていくことが重要だと思っています。地域ごとに事情というのは異なるんですけれども、最終的にはゴールというのは営業活動の品質や成果に差をなくすことです。地域ごとの差をなくすこと。そして一定のグローバルスタンダードを維持する。これが目標です。ですが、地域や国ごとに、言語はもちろんですけれども、文化、ビジネス慣習が異なってきます。これを考慮した内容にしないと、研修というのは非常に形式的なものになって、日常の営業活動には役に立たないということになってしまいます。リーダーは何を標準化すべきか、何を地域ごとに最適化するべきかを、あらかじめ自問してですね、明確にしておいて、具体的な研修を計画、実施する。これが非常に重要な点になってきます。
That's an excellent point. I think you're very right that if you don't have the answers to those questions up front, people will treat the training as just another check the box situation, as just another formality. Like you said, you really have to dive in and make sure that it's applicable and relevant to what they're doing on a local level and optimize accordingly. Yuichi, in your opinion, what makes value selling an effective sales methodology for companies in the APAC region?
先ほども述べたように、グローバルなセールストレーニングの重要な要素の一つとして、ローカリゼーションというものがあります。APAC の企業がグローバルなセールストレーニングを導入する場合、2つケースがあると思うんですね。グローバル企業が現地の APAC 子会社に向けたトレーニングをローカライズする場合です。そしてもう一つは、APAC の企業がグローバル展開する場合において、トレーニングを各地域ごとにアジャストしていく、スタンダードなトレーニングをベースにして、 ローカライズしていく。この2つのケースがあると思います。で、バリューセリングというのは基本的な考え方が非常にシンプルで適用性が高いので、このどちらの場合でも、この手法、バリューセリングの手法の長所を活かしながら、地域の違いを考慮したコンテンツをカスタマイズすることが可能です。つまり、グローバルスタンダードを APAC に当てはめるように、同じように APAC の企業の考えることを各ヨーロッパ、アメリカ、他の地域にアジャストすることが可能です。さらに当社というのはこのバリューセリングメソッドに精通したアソシエイトが各地にいます。彼らは各地域のもちろん言語はそうですし、文化、ビジネス習慣にも深い知識を持っています。で、この担当者がクライアントの地域ビジネスユニットのリーダーとですね、綿密に連携して、グローバルスタンダードから逸脱なく、かつ各地域に最適なトレーニングを提供する。アジア、APAC の企業にとって、バリューセリング導入するということは、すなわち実績のある標準化されたフレームワーク、これを導入すると同時に、さらに地域に最適化されたコンテンツでこれらのトレーニングを提供することができる。こういうことを意味していると思います。
I think that's a big point when you have that standardization, which you can fall back on as a global company and say, here's what we're doing, here's how we're going to market, right? Here's how all the teams are going to get on the same page, work together. And yet you also have like that simplicity, that repeatability, and that customization where you can really tailor it to the individual region. That's a powerful combination.
Yep.
Yuichi, thank you so much for coming on the show. It's been an absolute pleasure. If people want to learn more about you, where should they go?
Yeah, if you know more specific content or as a training, please contact me via LinkedIn or email.
All right, sounds good. Thank you again.
You've been listening to the B2B Revenue Executive Experience. To ensure that you never miss an episode, subscribe to the show in iTunes or your favorite podcast player. Thank you so much for listening. Until next time.